just gonna put my foot on the floor and I'm not lifting till I see God or a checkered flag.
Hello, and welcome back to Racing Thoughts, an IndyCar podcast. I'm Megan Dennis,
And I'm Meg Taylor.
and we are actually recording on a Sunday after a race, which is a little unusual for us, but should mean you are getting all of our thoughts really fresh.
Yep, very fresh. And for me, this was the first race of the season that I've actually been able to watch, so I feel really good about this.
So, relatively short news week this week. I'm not going to say there isn't more out there, but really only one big piece that I found to touch on. Again, there may have been more stuff that I missed. This week's been very busy from a work standpoint. Yeah, so bit of news this week relating to the great episode that we will have for the 500 coming out on May 1st. Is that we've gotten news that the Indy 500 grid will be at 34 drivers. It has been confirmed that the remaining cars that could have held additional seats would have been Chip Ganassi and Penske have both said that they will not be adding any additional cars. So that means that we are at a full field of 34. And it also means that Catherine Legg will not be running in the Elfmobile this year, which I was honestly a little disappointed to hear. But,
Yeah, it's always sad to see that she's like not going to be doing it, but just because of representation and women in motorsport, it's always nice to see, but it is what it is, I guess.
Is what it is, quite truly. So I guess from there, let's talk about Long Beach. Yeah. 50th running of the Acura Grand Prix of Long Beach. Of course, this weekend kicked off on Friday with practice one. I think the stories about practices and including warm up are all going to kind of be the same and then not be something we particularly are going to talk about when it comes to race time. So, practice one on Friday. I don't know if you got the chance to watch it, but
And I was too busy at work, unfortunately.
so with this one, Pato ended up hitting the wall, and with that, he only got 5 laps of running in. Ended up being a drive shaft in the full left rear that had to be replaced. Ended up to a gearbox change later on in the weekend. So not the greatest with that for him. They also talked about on the broadcast that statistically, this is the worst race of Pato's career. Routinely does not do well in Long Beach. And to jump ahead, kind of held true to what his final outcome was as well. There was a really bad bump on the back turn. I want to say it was turn 9. That was like basically taking all four wheels off. Cars were having a lot of bottoming happening there. This led to Colton actually having to change the dampers in his car, which then presented issues later on too, where he ended up actually breaking a toe link in qualifying. So, not the best track conditions that we saw coming from practice one, and then again, like I said, kind of carried over into practice two and qualifying results for Saturday. With that, I did not get the chance to watch practice two. I was at a work event, unfortunately, on Saturday. I missed practice two, but did see that Scott Dixon had a pretty bad crash as well. Again, kind of the story to everything but the race for this weekend. So that was kind of the big thing from what came of that. And then going into qualifying, I think we had a pretty good qualifying that actually, occurred from all of that. With this one, we did see that two of the Penskes did not transfer. Joseph didn't make it out of round one, nor did Will Power make it out of round one. So that I think was very, very interesting, in my opinion, as far as that goes. So that's 2 weekends in a row, and it's something I think I even said as part of our predictions was this idea that like, oh, surely like Penske's gonna bounce back, maybe it's just a thermal issue with qualifying. Like this isn't, and I still stick with it. It's not normal,
Yeah.
qualifying pace for them. So, that is, I think, a little shocking. And I guess maybe something to watch as we lead into Barber as far
Mhm.
as like, okay, what's going on with the Penskes and their qualifying? Because we see it in the race. It doesn't seem to be a matter of pace.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting to see because I didn't realize how low that they had started until I was like watching the race today. And I'm like, are they trying like setup stuff for, the actual race? Are they really trying to switch things up in terms of the setup for like the car for the rest of the season? I don't know. But like, it's very strange. It's very odd and not like the Penske that we know, which is very clinical.
I do, and I don't think it's a setup thing. I do want to say that I think it is a testament that the field was very, very tight, both on the hards and the softs. Once they threw on those alternates to run quality laps, like we were seeing guys go straight on onto the reds. and putting bigger laps in that way instead of keeping the primaries on, which I don't think is normally what we see in qualifying, just because that was the testament of like how close it was. So like for
Mhm.
Group 2, Rossi ended up transferring into that Class 6, but it was 4 hundredths of a second between him and Scott Dixon. And then it
Oh,
was another hundredth from there between Scott Dixon and Graham Rahal. So I think it's really just kind of a testament to like we are seeing this kind of qualifying gap almost like
shrink.
close. Oh, yeah. And then, as far as Class 12 goes, I think a lot of them were kind of people you would probably expect to be there. Pato transferred, Nolan transferred, Lungar transferred, so all three McLarens did transfer into that Fast 12, but actually Christian Lungar had a pretty nasty crash, and they talked about in the race he actually had to run a whole new tub for the race today because of how bad it was into the tires, which meant it caused a red flag, and so that like Nolan and Pato were both on a lap, didn't get that in, none of them transferred. Which kind of meant like the ones that were in that Fast Six were everyone we would Kyle Kirkwood, of course, took pole. Colton Herta was second. Marcus Ericsson was there. So all three Andretti's. Historically, always good at Long Beach, showing once again that they are good at Long Beach. That just kind of is what it is. But, in comparison to Joseph and Will, we saw Scott McLaughlin in that top six, which is kind of the exact opposite of what happened at Thermal when he was the worst of the qualifying Penskes.
It's just so bizarre from Penske. I don't understand what's going on.
I don't know. I feel like that was a long ramble, and I don't really know where I was going with that, other than the story of practice 1 to qualifying and even warm up was that everyone wanted to touch each other, touch a wall, or get way too close to where you didn't want to be. Because
Yeah.
in warm up, I also didn't get the chance to watch warm up either this morning, but in warm up, it was also that Jabel and Colton ended up making contact with each other because Jabel was diving for pit lane. Colton tried to get around him because Colton, I think, was on a flying lap at that moment and just
Ran into the back of
to
Abel.
the back of him. Yeah, like it was.
It was weird. But
Yeah,
all of that to say, we did get Kyle Pole.
yeah, we did. So statistically, this means Beard Kyle is 2 for 2 for poles at Long Beach.
Indeed. Do you have anything else from the lead up, or should we jump straight into it?
No, that's all I got.
Okay.
Meg, what are your thoughts on Long Beach? Well, actually, back up. What are your thoughts on IndyCar on Fox now that you finally have gotten to watch a race?
Okay, so I do have a few things that I was questioning throughout, and I have written down as well. So, going through a few of the things that happened in the first like few laps, immediately I go, I don't like the Fox graphics on the side. So I found
They're
that the
better than
graphics
the first two races, if that makes it any better.
that makes it honestly a little bit more sad. But it was just very confusing because we had the top five were kind of like cemented and highlighted, bigger than everybody else's, fine, normal, whatever. Though, because the way that it is organized does not make sense. You have no idea that it's a difference in timing versus a difference of speed or something. It was bizarre. I didn't understand it. Also, the graphics of the faces, a little bit freaky.
So much better.
But they're a
So
little
much
bit
better.
freaky.
Well, you saw the cartoons, right?
I did.
Okay, so like this is tenfold better. I'm not saying they're good. There's room for improvement. Oh, speaking of that, something I want to point out because now you finally saw the intro video.
Okay.
I am very pleased that Fox now has put the cars so you actually can see the liveries that they are driving beside
Yes.
their picture. We haven't had that for the last two races, and I think in a world of IndyCar, if you are new to this and if you go back to episodes at the beginning, you know that I have complained about this at the beginning.
Yep.
I've actually grown to love it. I love our different liveries now. But I think if you're new to it, especially if you're coming from like the world of F1 or F2, where you're used to like, oh, a team's all going to have the same colors.
Yeah.
Don't do that in IndyCar. And it's even that, the drivers may change liveries, race to race, depending on who their primary sponsor is for that race. So it's like, Kirkwood last two races was in the Chili Mobile, but we didn't get the Chili's Mobile this week. We had the prefab number 27 Andretti Global Honda. Oh, wonderful. Great car, but wasn't the Chilian-mobile. You have Scott McLaughlin, who drove the printer wagon this weekend. He's been running his yellow XPEL Chevy the two before this. He's driving the meat wagon next weekend, or not weekend, 2 weeks. Barber, 3 weeks. Barber,
Wait, we get
whatever
the
that
meat
is.
wagon and barber?
You get the meat wagon and Barber. I've been yelling at for a week since I found out. We'll cover why that's so important when we do our Barber preview for people who may not have been around and known about this. And actually, I don't think we had a podcast at that point, so y'all probably don't. We'll have a whole segment on the meat wagon.
Just about the meat wagon.
But all that to say, I think it was something really cool that the IndyCar graphics team did this week that we haven't had the 2 weeks prior, is putting the car beside them with their driver intros.
Yeah.
Do I think the idea behind that driver intro is wonderful? Yes. Do I think we need to clean it up for next year so these guys know what they're doing a little bit more? Also, yes, but that's irrelevant at this point, quite honestly.
Yeah. Anyways, so then I think the only other thing that I had about IndyCar on Fox was, I think this is just like a personal issue of just like I didn't like Fox's camera work. But again, it felt very choppy. Like it wasn't following cars super well. But like, I don't know. It also just might be a skill issue on my end because I haven't watched an IndyCar race since last season. And so maybe I'm just like trying to get used to it again and like figuring it out with it being on Fox. I don't know. I do appreciate the picture in picture commercials. And then I watch the races on Hulu Live. And so then I would get the ads from Hulu. And I guess that's maybe a separate thing than the Fox ads or something. I don't know. But I was able to watch more of the racing than I felt like I have been able to previously when it was on Peacock because of it was constantly cutting out or we'll be right back with your programming or whatever it was. So I think that's just me being me. Because then also, again, going back to the camera work, it felt like they were following Pelot at the very end for quite some time. And like, don't get me wrong, I love watching him drive. However, he was not the race leader, nor was he part of the battles that I was interested in watching. So it felt like they were focusing on like the wrong thing. Do you know what I mean?
Yes, and I will, to your first point on, I think it is a little bit of combination of both of that. Like maybe it is just you haven't watched races yet, so we know getting into IndyCar takes a little bit to get back in kind of the swing of like what is the IndyCar race. But I also think they're definitely, and it has improved, mind you, from race one to now, it's definitely improved. But it is a little bit of like Fox does make interesting choices as far as to where they want to put emphasis, and that sometimes we miss a lot. I was actually talking to Cass about this a couple weeks ago following Thermal, and we kind of got into that long discussion. I mean, we were completely on the same page to that same point that you were saying. Of it is just kind of like, why are they choosing what they're choosing? What is
Yeah.
the reasoning behind this? And like some of it makes sense, but then some of it is just kind of like they focus, like, yeah, Plo, he is the guy.
Yeah.
Whatever you want to feel about it, he is the guy. I have nothing against Alex Plo. I'm glad he's excited to go see his child on Monday. That was very cute. But it's just one where we're missing a lot of those midfield battles. And I think we've touched on this before on the podcast, maybe following St. Pete. I think it was following St. Pete that we talked about it. Or maybe it was off air, but I think we're missing that with Fox a little bit. And sometimes I think
agree.
they cut to angles where it's just kind of like, I don't know why, like, I'm not saying this stuff isn't important, but why right now?
Yeah. No, I think like I remember making the note of like Fox's camera angles, specifically when it jumped from literally like three different shots of corners where cars were already passed. And I'm like, great, but there's nothing for me to actually watch here. And they were like very fast, like sequential in a row. I couldn't follow which cars were in which shots, didn't know if there was overtaking happening or what was going on. It was just really fast back of cars as they were already through basically the entire frame. And so that was kind of what that was about. But then, like, I don't get it. But I think to the point of like them not necessarily showing the midfield battles, I think this is where I was kind of saying maybe this is just like a me issue because I care about watching the midfield because I am a fan of so many of what would be considered midfields. But like, you know what I mean? Like we care about a lot more drivers than maybe necessarily like a casual IndyCar fan does. And so we want to see who we want to support, who may not be the ones that are getting like broadcast on TV because they're not like the popular ones or whatever. But I don't know. It was just like very interesting choices.
I would be intrigued to go back to the beginning of last year and kind of see if, quite honestly, maybe it was similar things with NBC. Because, like, I mean, this time last year, I was just getting into the sport
Yeah.
and, quite honestly, was missing a lot of races or only seeing bits and pieces of races at the beginning of the season just because I was busy with baseball and other things going on. So, like, maybe is it recency bias to an extent? Because at the end of the season, we had a really tight title fight, but we also had a very tight fight for the leader circle for those last four races. I think maybe that's something for us to, maybe we try to keep that in mind and see if, as we go throughout the season, if one, hopefully Fox's coverage gets better, because I do think
Yeah.
they need to work on when they're flipping the cameras. And I think maybe
Yes.
that's just like production just isn't used to it yet, especially
Mhm.
for like road and street courses. I think since they've had NASCAR, I would like to assume oval races will be better.
I would hope so. I was kind of thinking that just myself of like maybe they're just trying to do the NASCAR thing with IndyCar, that that's clearly not going to work, but I don't know.
I think maybe that's something we need to hold on to, like, and keep coming back to of like,
Yeah.
hopefully you guys get better. And we know in first year it's always going to be an issue. But hopefully as the season continues, if we are getting that tighter fight for the leaders circle, that we are actually going to be able to see that, discussed more, see those, oh,
Hmm.
we're fighting over 12th spot or 15th spot. Oh, right now we don't care. Right now we maybe don't need to care. Like, yeah, I cared that Alexander Rossi was in 15th and Pato was right behind him and that
Yeah.
Pato got around him and I was to see that. And I
Yeah.
recognize that too. I'm like, okay, that was spots 16 and 15 and 16. Like,
Yeah. Like that's not the most
who
exciting thing.
cares? Yeah.
Yeah. That's why I'm kind of like, yeah, like I'm frustrated with it, but that's also again just a personal bias that I know that I have. And, you know, like you said, it's something that we're going to have to keep in mind and keep revisiting over the course of the season. And I also think that we may be having some biases as well because all we have known previously was IndyCar with NBC and Peacock. So we're used to that sort of thing. And so maybe this is just us being a little bit stubborn about something new. I don't know. But, you know, we can only be introspective after the fact. And it's just going to have to keep being something that gets revisited as time goes on, as hopefully, I don't know, hopefully Fox gets better. And from what you've said, that they have been getting better. So, like, that leads me to believe that overall it's going to be trending upwards if they keep listening to us.
Yes, and I think that's kind of, like Hinge has talked about that on Off Track more than once of like Fox knows that they're coming into something they are wanting to grow. They are
Yeah.
wanting to grow IndyCar. They are wanting to grow the sport. So I commend them for everything they're doing right now because NBC did not do that for 12 years, however long they had them under
Yeah.
a contract, maybe longer than that. So I am not mad at Fox. I
No.
want to see them do better. It's kind of like what I tell my students of like, you're never going to be perfect at this, but you
Mhm.
got to do better every time. So I'm
Yep.
glad to see that Fox is getting better, but I think right now, we're passing with like a solid C, and like by the 500, I need them to be at like a A minus at worst.
Yeah. No, that 500 coverage needs to be nothing short of immaculate, and I will not accept anything else.
All right.
But at least Fox is listening. That's all I can say is that they're listening and that they're changing. So keep doing that and we'll be fine.
Any other general thoughts? Or we gonna talk about Long Beach?
No, I think that's pretty much it. I mean, all the other things that I have notes on are things that were happening throughout the race. So I think we can dive right into it.
All right, take it away. Where do you want to start?
This might be a little mean. The first
Well,
note that I
we'll figure out
have,
what level of being is acceptable for the podcast.
the first note that I have says, not gonna lie, I forgot Nolan kind of existed.
Oh,
I felt so bad. I saw, so when we went green flag and everything, right? Happens. We see like the three McLarens go like kind of sequentially. And that was when I was like, oh yeah, there's three McLarens. I forgot Nolan existed
Poor
because
Nolan.
I feel so bad.
He was driving with food poisoning too. He had to go
Oh
to
my God, poor child.
he had to go to the medical center and get like 3 bags of IVs before the race. He was apparently sick all weekend. I mean, Stingray did it last year too.
That's absurd.
They have
He-
no self-preservation. They're most of them didn't finish high school. Their thoughts are drive fast.
I know, that's so true.
Look, this isn't F1. We trust Dr. Julia. If Dr. Julia said he was okay to drive, he was okay to drive.
That is so true. And Dr. Julia, we trust. Okay. All right. Fine. Anyways, all of that to say, I kind of forgot he existed and I felt really bad about it. And I'm so sorry, Nolan. I love you, you tiny thing.
We are rooting for you, Nolan.
We are.
You may be a little farther down the list than others, but we are rooting for you.
Listen, you can go back to our very first episode from last season where we were talking about the 500, and I made a note saying, watch out for Nolan Siegel because he's going to be a name that we know. And guess what? Here we are.
That is true. That is
I did.
100% true.
I think another thing that was very interesting was to see the strategy choices with the tires because they were on the green alternates,
Yeah, they
right?
were on greens, not reds.
Yeah,
'Cause it's
they
the
were on
street.
green alternates. So
Yeah.
the Waiuli green alternate tires tend to have a lot more degradation. They are much softer, but they're faster for a very shorter period of time. But it was interesting. I mean, I always like to figure out what tire strategy is, and it was a very interesting choice that Joseph started on the green alternates and then pit so early. But you know what? He was getting the softs off early. That way he could, just do the primaries, kind of stick
Well,
with it.
and arguably, I think that was the primary strategy
Yeah.
for this week. Joseph just went in really early.
Because Colton went in on lap 5, Scotty Mac went in shortly after, like immediately after, actually, because there was that drama with them coming out of the pit lane at the same time.
I thought their cars were gonna kiss.
I forget how nerve wracking live racing is for me. And I had to literally take off my Apple Watch because it was telling me that my heart rate was excessively high. And this is coming from someone with POTS. So my heart rate is already high.
Speaking of Joseph, though, the
Yeah.
seatbelts.
Yeah, that was crazy.
5 times. 5 times his seatbelts came off. Because that's what Hinch said at the end, that he had come in 2 more times for seatbelts.
I had seen him come in initially, and like it was lap 61. And I was super confused because some guy literally just jumped inside the cockpit. I was like, what the hell is happening? Seatbelt. But then he pit again a lap later. He came in another time after that.
Yeah, because it came loose again. Well, Hinch said on the broadcast, though, apparently, like, he's had that happen at Long Beach more than once because with the hairpin, you go from so fast to, like, that's the slowest corner on IndyCar. Like, it's 31 miles per hour there. Like, it's the same as being in a road car. And that the way you have to essentially, like, completely, like, flip your arms to get through it, it will end up causing, if your belts, because of the way the 6-point harness is done, if your belts are even slightly loose, if that's how you like to wear them, if you catch it just right as your arms are flipped, it will actually loosen those belts. So he said it's not good and it's not supposed to happen, but it does happen to drivers at Long Beach specifically. So I guess the positive news is it wasn't like a willpower issue like last year where his
Yeah,
seatbelts
I was just about to
failed.
say.
So at least it wasn't like his seatbelts failed. It was just clearly like whatever Joseph was doing in the hairpin, and he'd be like, Joseph, stop.
Yeah. Well,
But
that
at
was like
least
another
he
thing that I had written down of maybe this is just me not having watched an IndyCar race in so long, but like Scotty Mac was hammering at his steering wheel, and I forgot how hard it is to like freaking drive those cars because of like
no
no
power
power
steering.
steering.
No.
And I mean, I guess that still shouldn't be happening though, like if your seatbelt gets loose because of how your arms are turning. Like, I feel like that should be taken into consideration because that's not the only place that the drivers are really accentuating the steering wheel.
Oh, I agree. I found it very weird. I just know that's what Hinch said. But I
Yeah.
also am kind of thinking Hinch might be crazy after this week because you know how we talked about the faces at Long Beach and like how they're around the like pit in entrance.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I was talking to Cass about it, and like, there's no pictures of it anywhere. We tried so hard. We tried for an hour to find this. So I DM James Hinchcliffe and be like, all right, you told me this exists. Found the episode of Off Track where you talked about it. Where is it? And he's like, oh yeah, it definitely exists. It's on Pit M. Why did they not talk about it once this weekend? I swear he's crazy. And we're all living in his land of Delulu, where he and Alex Rossi apparently have their pictures beside each other in Long Beach because they won back-to-back years. If anyone knows that this exists, please DM the podcast on our Instagram at Racing Thoughts Podcast and send it to me because I need visual proof at this point.
No, this feels just like one giant conspiracy theory. Like, the fact that there's no pictures that exist is crazy.
Well, I'm like, I even know someone who's like serving as a marshal at the race this weekend. And I had texted her and was just like, I knew she was doing a track walk, and I was just like, hey, can you like find this for me? And she's like, I just finished a track walk. I don't know what you're talking about. Like, she's not really an IndyCar fan, so I'm hoping maybe she just didn't know what she was looking for. But like,
Is
no
this one of these
questions.
really niche things that only we care about?
But like, if all the winners get cemented at Long
How is
Beach,
there not a picture?
is there not a picture? How does no one but James Hinchcliffe, Alexander Rossi, and apparently me know about this thing? I mean, sure, I'll be part of that club any day, but
So
like,
good.
I just want a picture of proof.
Oh, I have another really funny note here. It kind of references something that I had mentioned last season on the podcast, where I said Pillow is like Jaws again, just sneaking his way up the front with strategy and somehow ended up behind Kyle by lap 10.
I mean, I can't say I'm shocked. He said start, I think, P4. So,
Yeah.
like, Pillow gonna do what Pillow does.
Pillow will pillow. But it was just, again, it was so funny because up until lap 10, the early pit stops kind of shook things up a little bit. I lost Pato lap 5. He had such a unassuming race. But so this is one of my favorite things about Pillow is that if you stop paying attention to him, he does insane things and then he just shows up. And then you're like, how the did he do that? And it's one of my favorite things, truly. And that's exactly what happened. And I was like, Pillow's gonna do what Pillow does. And again, it's the Jaws theme song.
No, I think that is fair. I'm gonna jump ahead to the end of the race. There's stuff I want to go back and talk about. Let me jump the end. This is no hate to Alex Pillow or Alex Pillow fans. Let me state that from the beginning. But I'm also very glad that he didn't win.
Yeah.
One, I'm very excited about who did win, but also, like, two, he's running away with his championship very early, and he would have been the sixth driver in IndyCar history to win the 3 races in a row. I don't know how that aligns with it being the beginning of the season, but like that's insane. And so I'm very like I do not want this championship to be wrapped up by the end of June.
Yeah.
And I know, I mean, we said it last week, like someone's got to beat him. And by that, I mean, it's like someone's got, I mean, we got ovals coming up. That'll be the test. We know he can't finish, he can't win on an oval.
Yeah.
And I say that because he hasn't, like, statistically, that is true right now. If he can't
Yep.
win on an oval, I don't know. I guess it's just like, I like when championship fights are tight. I like when there's a lot of excitement going towards the end of the season. And
Yeah.
I'm worried this is going to be less like 2024 and more like 2023, where he just completely, or was it
Dominated.
2022?
No,
Whatever year it was. No, it was 23. Yeah.
23.
When he ran away with it, and we were 3, 4 races from the end, and it was done. It was
Yeah.
his, and there was
Yep.
nothing anybody could do about it. We couldn't have Scotty Mac hijinks of threatening to lock him in a bathroom. Like, it's the stuff this sport needs.
Yeah.
It's the unseriousness of motorsport that we deserve.
It's the whimsy that we desire. No, I fully agree with that. And, like, I think it would be a massive disservice to new IndyCar fans if Polo did run away with the championship. Because you think about a lot of the new IndyCar fans are older F1 fans and, like, have been F1 fans for years. And F1 is a sport that is dominated by dynasties. Like, you just have multiple championships and, like, that's great if that's your driver. You know, it's not so great if you're a fan of another driver or another team and all you want is to see something interesting. And like you're going from F1, where the past several years has been Max Verstappen and Red Bull domination. You also are coming off of Mercedes domination. You're coming off of Ferrari domination. So you're living in these eras of just one team, one driver winning over and over and over again versus IndyCar, where we're seeing the gap between cars lessen and lessen, which is great for racing. But then again, Polo does what Polo does and somehow finds a way to come out on top. That's not super exciting in the sense of the championship fight. And if you're a new IndyCar fan coming from F1, then you're just going to be like, well, this is more just the same stuff, which is not what we want. But like you mentioned, someone has to beat him in order for this to happen. And granted, we are 3 races in, so there's a lot more championship to fight for. But
Well, and at this point, it's twofold, though. It's a matter of someone has to beat him, which we
yep,
saw. Kyle Kirkwood won today. Like, he got beat, but Alex Palou finished second. So now we are at the point where it can't just be, oh, you have to beat him. But something else has to happen that takes him out of that
yeah,
contention. We
yeah,
need him finishing, 8 and below. The 3 other guys that
yeah,
are not Alex Palou in that top 4 need to then be also being the ones in that top 4 every time.
yeah,
Or somebody else needs to come in and just win everything else. And I know who I want that to be. We'll see if that actually happens. But like, I think that's kind of where we're at now. It's not even just a matter of can you beat him, but what can you do to get Alex Palou to bleed first.
yeah. The thing that I do like about IndyCar is that you can get a lot of additional championship points elsewhere outside of your finishing spot. Like, you get points for laps led, and I don't think Polo led any laps. Perfect example is that's a great opportunity to take away championship points from him. And yeah, but I'm like, that's a great place to take away championship points from him and, keeping him behind in those instances. But I don't know. It all comes down to strategy and qualifying and all of those things. And he's just unfairly consistent across the board. He also doesn't even have to be winning these races to run away with the championship.
Well, that's what happened last year. I mean,
Yeah.
he didn't run away with it last year, but like
He
he
still
really did not
comfortably
have a
led
ton
for
of
quite a
wins. He
while.
just, speaking of leading laps, I want to brag on our boy Stingray Rob, who led 12 laps today, finished ninth in the race, which is his highest ever finish. So, like, good job, Stingray. Hey, you kid.
Yeah, we love to see it.
He and Robert Schwartzman were on a completely different strategy than the primary strategy and the alternate strategy. Really know what they were doing, but like clearly it worked for Mr. Raw. Good job, Singbon. We're proud of you.
Good job, Sting Bob.
Rossi's hybrid's still awful and evil and not doing its job. I don't know more details. I guess we'll find out on Thursday, but like
Yeah,
it
that's
sucked on Friday, and I'm assuming it was the issue he had in the race today.
yeah. I don't like that.
And I lied on our one to watch apparently because like no offense, Louis Foster, but you didn't give us any.
I saw a very interesting, like, little tidbit of information from Fox was that there's only one caution in the first 3 races, which is crazy considering the amount of cautions that we have had previously, and especially last season. If you remember, what was it? Detroit had an absurd amount of cautions and like barely any green flag racing. And now all of a sudden we have 3 races and 1 caution.
And it's really frustrating, quite honestly. Like St. Pete historically always is filled with cautions.
Yeah.
I think they were the race that had one this year. Thermal, we're all on the standpoint of take thermal off the calendar, but that's neither here nor there. Long Beach, one yellow and the whole race changes. And I feel like it's very weird in that like Firestone brought these tires that are having dramatically less deg
Hmm.
than in years past. And we have all these incidences and practices and qualifying and like people can't drive. I forgot to talk about Santino Ferrucci. Like took himself out of qualifying because he was in the runoff and just like forgot how to turn. Kind of important in racing. It happens. Ask James Hinchcliffe about it. That's what I'll tell you. Make sure you turn left. But all that to say, it's just like we're having our incidences, and then it's racing, and it's just like
Nothing's happening.
nothing's happening, despite the fact that we are having closer racing.
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense, and tires that are falling off like immediately. It doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, the tires are so strange where it's like it feels like it's now just two extreme ends of the spectrum with the tires. It's like they're either lasting way longer and there's no deg, or they are completely falling off.
Yeah. I mean, it's truly, I mean, this race and the last three have shown that, like, this race was less so, but it was a lot cooler in Long Beach than the two previously. But, like, if you take St. Pete and Thermal, God, all the tires were doing was immediately falling off. Like, I mean, you were getting 2 good laps if you were lucky
On the
on the,
alternates?
well, for Thermal, it was the primaries. The primaries you could get 1 lap on. So, like, Firestone is listening and saying that, like, oh, we clearly need to do something about this to
Yeah.
make racing better. They're listening to the drivers, they're listening to the fans. I appreciate that. They're closer to the 2023 tires, but something
Mm.
that, like, Rossi talked about is they didn't take into account of the weight of the hybrid. Now, Firestone's still rolling, Firestone does really good with their tires, and
Yeah.
that they will change them throughout the year as they need to. But I don't know, from a racing standpoint, are we at F1 levels of boring right now? Absolutely not. But,
No.
like, is this the exciting IndyCar racing that I saw last year? I'd also lean a little bit towards no. But then again, it goes back to this idea of, like, is this recency bias? Am I thinking of the stuff we had at the end? Am I thinking more of the ovals, which we know are inherently always more exciting because there's just, especially our short tracks, where there's going to be more opportunity to pass? I don't know.
Well, all of these things are important to keep in mind as we keep watching, but no, I do agree that there's something that's really off about it, and we can have our feelings about it, but I do think objectively that it's not as exciting for whatever reason that might be. But I do think that the tires are very interesting, but it is what it is, I guess.
Would you like my one other rant about Long Beach?
Sure.
So, we have 27 cars on the grid. How many
Yeah.
red cars do you think we had this weekend?
Oh gosh. I know there's too many for you. Too many for you to like.
13.
13 red cars?
13 red cars this weekend. Again, going back to the fact of, like, I've now grown to love that we get a bunch of different liveries. I should be able to pick out cars on track. This is ridiculous when it's that many cars. Like, all 3 Penske's were in red this weekend. I'm just like, okay, maybe that's a Penske. No, it's an MSR car. Like, or, okay, it's Santino Ferrucci. Like, the only reason you know it's the premise is because they have that little bit of green, but, like, they're also a red car. Like, it's just,
Yeah.
Kyle was in a red car this weekend. So I'm like, everyone's team cars should not look the same of being red, black, and white. Like, pick a new
Yeah.
color.
No, I get that. There are so many red cars. So this brings up a question of like what are the requirements for like the livery stuff and like who makes the decisions of what cars are allowed to change to what liveries or whatever the case may be because that's ridiculous. The cars do look way too similar and it's like I don't know. What are the rules on that?
There doesn't seem to be rules. Yeah, you can use any font. You just have to be able to see the assigned number from the top and the side. That's it. There's no rules other than that. As
That's
long as you can see the
crazy.
number from both sides and the top, that's all you have to have.
That is
They need to get more.
insane.
They need to get more creative. Is all I'm hearing here. There's no rules. Have fun with it. Have fun with 13 red cars.
Yeah. No, I do think that we've seen some very fun and very interesting different liveries. But I agree. If there's
Connor
no
Daly's
real yeah, Connor Daly's car was
this week. Is
beautiful.
that purple? That purple was beautiful. Good job, Connor.
So stunning. But like I want to see stuff like that. I want to see some interesting car designs. Do you remember Stingray's Dalmatian car from last year?
Yeah, that's how he and I became friends.
I'm obsessed with that and I need that to come back because that was so fun. I don't remember what the actual sponsor was, but it just reminded me of 101 Dalmatians.
Like, I don't mind that they change it up week to week. I think that's fun. I think it's fun, what are they driving, especially when you have some that, like, have the fun names. Like, okay, you have the Dex Imaging printer wagon that Scotty Mac was in this weekend. I don't even know what red car Joseph was driving this weekend, but, like, you have his blue PPG Chevy that's, like, gorgeous that he's
I
wearing for the
love
first two races. Like, it's the prettiest car. Willpower is allowed to always have red. It's his Verizon car. He can do
Yeah,
whatever he wants. He's Willpower. Like,
yeah.
do what you want, Alien Man. We support you. If you want your car to be red, that's fine. Like,
Like he's the one that we can allow to continue to have red in his car. Everyone
yes.
else needs to mix it up.
Yeah. Or it's like, okay, if you're putting out a new livery and you look and you see that like three other cars are running red this week, maybe you need to go to those sponsors and be like, look, I get that might be your primary color in your logo. We have fun with this.
Yeah, like that's kind of what I was questioning is like what is the decision process leading up to what like liveries are used for what races and like this is going to sound like such a niche like reference and I don't even know if this was like a thing for you, but for you back in high school, did you ever have like Facebook groups for like homecoming and prom dresses that girls would post their dresses in? Oh my God. I don't know if this is just like a unique to my school or whatever the case, but
I
we
know of
had these.
people doing it, but I went to
Okay.
a school with like, I graduated with 100 people. This is not a concern.
Yeah, but you post dresses of like your homecoming dress or your prom dress to make sure that no one else had the same dress or like something similar and it would cause problems. I'm like, I feel like IndyCar teams need to have a Facebook prom dress group where they post the liveries being like this like this is the livery that I'm planning on running this weekend. No one else can have red.
Or at least like within the teams,
Mhm.
like, unless that is your thing, it's like, okay, Splenda, ECR, they're just Splenda now.
They're just one.
ECR has the Splendamobile and the Java wagon. Like, they complement each other. They use the
Yeah.
same color patterns, but they're different cars. Kind of the
But
same
you can
thing.
clearly tell that they're on the same team, though.
Yes. And I think that's okay if it's
Yeah.
like you are using to show the same team. What I don't like is like, okay, this weekend all three Penske's were red, but it wasn't like a connecting factor red. It was just our primary sponsor for this weekend is red. Same thing, quite honestly, with Andretti this season of
Mhm.
like, okay, you have the Chili's Mobile, which is red and white, and then now the prefab one this weekend was also red and white. And then you have the whatever Marcus Erickson's car is. That's also red and white. And so I'm just like, okay, they look the exact same, but like
Mhm.
not in a way that like looks good because they
Yeah.
still look very different. It's just the same color patterns. So I at least think like within the teams, you need to either decide like, are we all going different approaches or are we all going to have like a consistent, like at least color scheme happening?
Yeah. No, like the same thing happens with like McLaren. They all have the orange throughout, but their car design is different, you
Hmm.
know?
Yeah.
So like, but that stays the same throughout the entire season. And like, is that just because they're lucky enough to have a sponsor that stays the entire time? Yes. But it's still connecting and you can still pick them out and still tell the difference between them.
Yeah.
Mm.
Anyways, that was a
Yeah,
long rant to
that
to
was
basically say 13 red cars is at least six too many.
yeah. It's too many. Let's see what else happened in the race. Anything of importance for you?
No, no, honestly, I think my answer is no. The race is boring.
I will say though, at the very end of the race, when Kyle was coming out of the pits to fight off Polo at the very end, that was some stunning racing and just like very fun to watch. But then even later after that, there was the battle between Will Power, Scott McLaughlin, Colton, and Scott Dixon that I thought those last few laps were so much fun to watch.
Yes.
It happened at the very end, and then they kind of refocused on like Pillow and then they went back to Kyle, who eventually went on to win the race.
I'm sure I watched it. I don't know if it clearly made a lasting impact on me.
It was just one of those. They're not even like midfield. They were like still pretty high up there within the grid, but I just remember watching those four battle it out, and it was very fun to watch. Like, it was some really good, very close, but just neat driving that I thought was really interesting, that from those four people would not have expected anything else, and I want to see more of that.
One other thing. Apparently, there was some sort of dust up between Felix and Devlin at some point, I guess post race. And Felix to the IndyCar radio guy goes, "He's a really nice guy, but not the sharpest knife in the drawer." So this is 2 races in a row where Devlin's out here causing problems.
Oh man, just dude, what is happening with this guy? I don't understand. Anyways, all of this to say, my favorite quote that I heard from broadcast, from pole position to checkered flag, there was Kyle Kirkwood who won the race, and I was so happy that the first race I watched for the season, Kyle had won.
I thought you were going to get at least 2/3 of your podium at one point when we had Kyle
Yeah, no, I
P1
really
and Alex P2, and I was really excited. And then I guess Alex Rossi ate his hybrid again.
yeah. But I mean, he's not the only one that's had consistent hybrid issues.
If it's this race, yes, he will have been the only one who's had it every race in a row. And
Well,
Christian's not
yeah.
having that problem.
Yeah. I wonder what's going on.
All right, I think I'm done with Long Beach. Do you have anything else?
I think one more thing about Kyle's win is
What?
that third career win, second on road courses, and it's Long Beach is also where he won for the first time, right?
And he's 2 for 2 with beard.
2 for 2. He's 100% with Beard Kyle at Long Beach. And then the very last note that I had is Kyle looks so happy, I could cry for him.
All right, championship standings as they currently are. Shout out to the Fox Graphics team for putting this up because I don't think the website's up to date yet. In 10th place, Alexander Rossi. In 9th, Will Power. In 8th, Scott McLaughlin. 7th, Colton Herta. 6th, Pato O'Ward. 5th, Scott Dixon. 4th, Felix Rosenquist. 3rd, Christian Lungar. 2nd, Kyle Kirkwood. And your NTT championship leader still is Alex Palou. The gap right now between him and Kyle is 34 points, so it is at least a race. If you go all the way down to Felix in 4th, then we are getting at about 54 points. So I want to say 54 points is the max you can get in a weekend. So we are about at the point of being able to, like, say he is a whole race ahead of everybody but the 2 guys right behind him, which is insane.
Yeah. Goes back to what we were saying. Someone's got to beat him, and someone's got to hold him off from scoring all the points. So, guys, get on it.
All right. Next week we will be back discussing and previewing Barber, which also means we are weeks away from being in Birmingham, Alabama ourselves with boots on the ground.
I'm so excited. It's going to be the best weekend ever.
So excited. So excited.
It's going to be amazing. And I can't wait to do the preview with you guys because we can talk about our experiences from last year and just kind of talk a little bit more about our experiences.
The Augusta of motorsports.
It really is. You know, it's a silly nickname, but also very fitting considering when we are recording this is Masters weekend as well. It really is the Augusta of motorsport. It is a beautiful track, and just the grounds for it is incredible. And we also just obviously have such incredible memories there. So
Perfect.
excited to share it with you guys.
Yes, we will be back next week discussing all things with that. Follow us on our socials, Instagram and TikTok, Racing Thoughts Podcast. Again, if you know the picture of the faces, please send it to me. You can also send it to me personally at Meghan Ness. I just want to know this exists. Twitter, Racing One Thoughts. And we'll see you next Thursday.
Bye.